Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a place filled with noise, smoke, and the sticky scent of alcohol, the medieval tavern. This was the silent heart of every town, where news spread faster than any messenger, and the only place where knights, peasants, and poets could all get drunk, brawl, or laugh together. A tavern wasn't just about drinking. It was where danger, laughter, disease, and strange tales mixed freely beneath a thatched roof. So, before we get too comfortable, take a moment to hit like and subscribe. But only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And don't forget to drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and what time it is where you are. It's always amazing to see our little community reaching all across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan or some soft background noise, and let's begin tonight's journey, stepping straight into the bustling and shadowy world of a medieval tavern. Have you ever stepped into a place where the very door feels like the universe is testing your lungs? If not, congratulations. But if you happen to drift into Europe in the 1,300 seconds and pushed open the rickety wooden door of a tavern, you'd instantly understand what a fragrance attack really means. Not perfume, no. What hits you is a miraculous blend of smoke, sour beer, 3-day-old sweat, and something unnameable, maybe rotten onions, maybe the ghost of a chicken lost in the kitchen a week ago. This is the medieval tavern, where the air is so thick, you feel you could slice it into chunks and take them home. The first thing that greets you is the light, if you can even call it that. Forget neon signs or candlelit romance. The light in a medieval tavern is a cruel joke from the fire gods. A few tiny candles struggling desperately against a wall of smoke, while the hearth in the corner sends out both warmth and a steady stream of soot, painting the ceiling black over the years. That dim glow makes everything shimmer in suspicious ways. You glance at a table. Was that a beer stain or dried blood? You look up, just soot, or a palm-sized spider smiling down at you. Inside, ceilings are so low you have to duck, especially if you're taller than the average 14th century height, around 5'5". Forget once, you'll smack your forehead on a beam more than once in a night. Each thunk echoes through the tavern, followed by curses in every dialect around, all part of the chaotic soundtrack. The walls are rough wood, warped with age, their cracks letting in cold drafts that whisper winters on the doorstep. There are also accidental guestbooks, dozens of knife-carved names, crude drawings, or deep wisdom like John was here and John puked here. Instead of glass, windows are patched with animal hide or oiled cloth. Main function: keep out the wind. Side effect: trap every foul smell inside, turning the tavern into a giant jar of medieval atmosphere. Now imagine the air as a kind of stew with these ingredients. 40% wood smoke, 30% sour beer soaking into the floor, 20% human scent, sweat, wet wool, muddy leather boots, 10% surprise, garlic, cheese, or something you'd rather not know. Breathing here is like a ritual. You hold your breath, let your lungs adjust, and if you survive 5 minutes without gagging, congrats, you're one of them. The floor? Forget polished wood or stone tiles. It's packed dirt, covered with straw. At first it was dry straw. Then it absorbed years of beer, broth, rainwater from boots, even a bit of blood. Each step is an adventure. Squishy, crunchy, or slippery. Slip and fall? The wet straw cushions your landing but leaves you perfumed in ways no wash can fix. Furniture resembles old war veterans, wobbling, creaking, but still standing after countless drunken brawls. Sitting on a chair is a gamble. Either it holds, or it snaps as you laugh. No one complains, they just shrug. Tradition. Tables are carved, cracked, uneven, set your mug near the edge, and you're basically betting against gravity. The ceiling is low, blackened, and hung with garlic, onions, or meat curing in smoke. Romantic? Hardly. Look up and something might drop, a clump of ash, or a glob of fat from 3-day-old pork. Every sip of ale comes with suspense. Soundscapes matter here too. Even before it's crowded, there's a background mix. Wood groaning, wind whistling, logs crackling. Add in constant coughing, a steady drumbeat. A stray dog barks, then vanishes under a table. Together, it's medieval music you won't find on Spotify. Colours? Mostly brown and grey. Brown of wood, dirt, and spilled beer. Grey of smoke, wet cloaks, and ash. The only highlight is red, rarely velvet, more often blood smeared on a wall. Call it folk decor. And that door, it deserves its own mention. Every creak screams, "Leave me alone." Cold drafts rush in, carrying the smell of mud and horse manure, blending seamlessly into the stench inside. Then the door closes, and the tavern's air grows one layer thicker. Smoke reigns supreme. Chimneys clog, sometimes with dead birds, so smoke hangs low at eye level. Everyone looks like they're feasting in clouds. After hours, your eyes burn. Tears flow not from heartfelt soldier tales, but from being smoked like a ham. Smell is the true trial here. Imagine a perfume. Eau de medieval tavern. Top note, sour beer on the floor. Middle note, sweat and damp wool. Base note, forgotten cheese. Guaranteed to win you lots of personal space. Sometimes the whole scene feels like a painting. Flickering candles, stretching shadows, smoke curling above, wood shuddering in the draft, the door trembling as it shuts. If it weren't for the smell, you'd call it cinematic. But really, it's like a movie set designed to torment your nose. The tavern's climate has moods. Sit by the hearth, you sweat like in the desert. Move near the door, an icy draft chills you to the bone. It's the only place you can experience 4 seasons within a few feet. And finally, the darkness. Not just the absence of light, but a character of its own. Shapes distort, tables morph, shadows stretch into monsters. Darkness doesn't threaten outright, but it whispers, "Here, nothing is certain." You're thirsty, aren't you? After surviving that thick soup of smells in the tavern, your throat begins to scream, "I need something right now!" But warn yourself before you order. Here, drinks aren't exactly made to quench your thirst. They're a gamble. Every sip could be a cheerful moment, or a one-way ticket to meet God earlier than planned. Let's start with the most common drink. Beer. Don't picture frosty bottles, fluffy white foam, and triumphant music. Medieval beer had no idea what refreshing meant. It was more like fizzy porridge than a beverage. Colour. Murky, ranging from dark yellow to greyish brown, looking like dishwater after a feast. Smell. A mix of fermented grain and possibly a dead rat that once visited the barrel. Texture. Thick, full of floating bits. Sometimes it's unfiltered grain, sometimes leftover beard hair from the previous customer. You lift the wooden mug and stare at the swirling surface, wondering, is this beer or soup? But you're here now, no backing out. The first gulp hits like a punch to the tongue. Bitter, sour, oddly sweet, and above all warm. Yes, warm. No one here knows refrigeration. If you're lucky, it's lukewarm. If not, you're drinking something that tastes like broth reheated for 3 days. The funny thing? Even kids drank beer. Not for fun. Simply because water could kill you faster. Wells were full of invisible assassins, from parasites to disease. Beer was boiled and fermented. At least it killed some of those little enemies. So in a tavern, an 8-year-old and a 60-year-old might clink mugs together, and no one bats an eye. If you want something fancier, you might try mead honey wine. Sounds romantic. Golden sweetness, candlelight, drifting music. Reality? Tone down the fantasy. Medieval mead could shift from divine nectar to something like cough syrup left out in the sun. Smell, sweet, sharp, with a hint of smoke. Taste, sweet on the tongue, burning in the throat, leaving an aftertaste like honey mixed with metal. Risk. Because of the crude brewing process, barrels sometimes exploded during fermentation. Drinking it was a gamble. Either you felt blissful, or like you'd swallowed an angry swarm of bees. Mead carried a touch of luxury. Nobles and poets favoured it, claiming it inspired art. But imagine sitting next to a bard who's just downed half a jug. He might sing a song to shake the rafters or collapse snoring like an ox on the table. No one could predict which. In apple-growing regions, you'd find cider. Sounds tempting. Fermented apple juice, crisp and sweet. But remember, cold didn't exist, and sweetness was rare. Colour. Pale, yellow, often cloudy. Taste. Sharp, sour, astringent, like biting into an apple that's been rotting for 3 weeks under a tree. Feeling afterward, like mild acid polishing your teeth. Cider was poured into cracked, warped cups that sometimes still smelled like yesterday's stew. But in the tavern's dim light, who could tell? You gulp it down, grimace, then nod wisely as if you'd just tasted some rare vintage. That's the survival art of the medieval tavern. Wine, not the fine French bottles you know today. Tavern wine was often thin, sour, sometimes mouldy. In southern Europe, you might get something close to real wine. But in northern taverns, what passed for wine might just be grape juice that had lived several extra lives. Smell: old grapes, rotting wood, sometimes vinegar. Taste: bland, sour, with an aftertaste of rusty iron. Social value: holding a cup of wine was mostly to show off wealth, even if you have. We're really drinking something vineyard peasants wouldn't touch. A funny detail: tavern wine was sometimes watered down to stretch profits. Problem? The water was filthy. So instead of wine with water, you were drinking wine with disease. Even Bacchus, god of wine, would shake his head. And then there was plain water, the drink everyone knew meant quick death. Rivers and wells brimmed with bacteria, animal waste and debris. Some even had rotting carcasses hidden inside, unknown to the villagers. So, ordering water in a medieval tavern was basically signing your will. People joked, those who drink water get to meet God before the priest does. Even children avoided it, trained from the start to sip weak beer instead. Don't forget the vessels, the containers were part of the experience. You might drink from wooden mugs, soaked in beer, mouldy, sometimes sprouting fungi. Clay cups, fragile, cracked, leaking like a showerhead. Metal mugs, usually pewter, leaving a strong metallic taste in your mouth. Some still had last night's food clinging to them. Taverns rarely washed, just swished them in dirty water before passing them on. That created a sort of communal seasoning. You weren't just drinking beer, but also a trace of everyone before you. Whichever you chose, the experience was the same. Overpowering smell hits your nose. Bitter, divided by sour, divided by indescribable flavors spread over your tongue. Your throat burns. Your stomach protests. Why? And yet, strangely, you keep drinking. Not because it's good, but because there's no better choice. After a few gulps, your brain adapts. Bitter becomes rich, sour becomes distinct, and the alcohol turns into a brief escape from a harsh life. Are you hungry yet? Oh, trust me, being hungry in a medieval tavern is an experience no Michelin chef would ever want to handle. But here, hunger is the only force strong enough to make you order food. Why? Because tavern. Meals weren't trying to invite you in. They were daring your survival instinct. Are you brave enough to swallow me? Let's start with the one dish every tavern had: pottage, or in other words, stew. Sounds appealing, but in reality, it was more like a pot of whatever's left, dumped together and boiled. Colour: brown, grey, or dirty green, depending on ingredients. Texture: thick, thin, or an odd in-between state. Ingredients: absolutely anything. Wilted vegetables, broken grains, meat scraps, even leftover bones. If you were lucky today, you'd spot a carrot. If not, you'd scoop up half-gnawed chicken bone. You dip a spoon in, watching bubbles burst across the surface like storm clouds. Bring it close, and the smell hits. Burnt onions, overcooked cabbage, and maybe a hint of rust from the copper pot. The first mouthful doesn't slide smoothly. It ambushes your senses. A faint sweetness from grains, garlic's sharpness, and a murky flavour you can't name. Some describe pottage as a warm disappointment. Yet, pottage was everyone's saviour. It filled the belly, was easy to cook, and practically eternal. Each day the innkeeper just tossed in more veggies, water, or whatever they found, and kept it simmering. People joked that the tavern's pot had been bubbling since the innkeeper's great-grandfather, a family heirloom, not of recipes, but of centuries of leftovers. If you didn't want stew, you could try bread. But remember, tavern bread wasn't soft, fragrant, or white. It was rock hard, dirt black, and sometimes doubled as the bowl. The most common was black bread, made of barley or rye. Heavy as a brick, rough on the surface, and when you bit in, you could hear your teeth crack not from joy, but from enamel begging for mercy. Sometimes old loaves were used as trencher's plates. Food was piled on, sauces soaked through, and when you finished the meal, the bread itself became the main course. In other words, you ate your plate. The smell was simple, earthy, slightly burnt, with a mouldy edge if it had sat too long. Biting into it felt like gnawing raw wood. If lucky, you'd crunch an unground grain, adding a surprise: crisp. Many joked that medieval bread wasn't food, but a dental exam. Cheese in taverns wasn't the supermarket kind wrapped in pretty packages. It was pungent, hard, and sometimes alive. Yes, bugs in cheese weren't rare. Appearance: rough blocks, dark yellow or brown, full of holes. Smell: strong enough to silence a room when the lid came off. Taste: salty, sour, fatty, with the occasional bonus flavor from microbes. Cheese was cheap protein, but once you bit in, the taste stayed with you all night. It clung to your teeth, your tongue, and your breath. People joked, a piece of cheese will scare off enemies faster than a sword. Meat in a poor tavern was rare, but when it showed up, it was reason to celebrate. Still, don't expect tender cuts. Chicken, rabbit, pigeon, roasted or boiled until unrecognizable. Pork, beef, mostly scraps, bones, or tough meat left hanging too long. Smell: burnt fat, smoke, and sometimes a sour note of bad storage. Chewing it felt like gnawing leather, but for a few minutes it made you feel rich until you realized you were mostly chewing bone. Far from the sea but near rivers, you might see salted fish. Preserved to last winters, they were so salty your tongue shriveled at the first lick. Smell: strong, fishy, like stagnant seawater. Texture: dry, tough, sometimes crumbling. How to eat: soak in water, toss into stew, or choke down with bread. Eating salted fish was a test of will. Each bite sent a jolt of salt through your body. At least it made you drink more beer or whatever passed for beer. Eggs, chicken, duck, or goose showed up sometimes. But beware, you never knew if the one you cracked was fresh or fermented. Boiled eggs, yolks greenish-grey, sulphur stench. Fried eggs: rare, since oil was expensive. When fried, usually burnt black. Raw eggs: a few brave souls drank them for strength, usually running straight behind the tavern afterward. Vegetables: usually wilted, tough, or boiled to death. Cabbage: infamous, sharp smell, guaranteed to cause gaseous side effects. Onions, garlic: always present, strong, overused in stew. Carrots, turnips: appeared sometimes but often bitter and hard. Tavern veggies made many wonder if God invented them as punishment. And taverns had a knack for accidental creativity. Whatever was left went into a dish. Porridge: mushy, sticky, usually cold. Organs: liver, heart, guts boiled or charred. Rustic pies: filled with veggies or meat scraps, half burnt, half raw. Sometimes, diners found extras in food: feathers, bones, even bugs. People just shrugged. At least it's more protein. Every tavern boasted its signature dish, but don't think of it as culinary pride. It was usually just another version of stew, dressed up with a fancy name. For example, Hugh's House Special Stew, to really just leftover vegetables boiled again. Special roast to charred scraps of meat and bone. Ancestral bread to a loaf reheated for the 4th time. The only thing signature was that you'd never forget the taste even if you wanted to. When the plate finally sat in front of you, your senses endured this. Eyes: endless shades of brown, grey and black. Nose: smoke, grease, wilted veggies, salt. Tongue: bitter, sour, salty, sometimes painfully sweet. Hands: gripping bread hard as bricks, meat tough as boots. Ears: the crack of your teeth as you bite. Overall feeling: not a feast, but a negotiation with your stomach. And when hunger won, negotiation was pointless. You survived the smoke, the murky beer, and the mysterious stew. Good. But brace yourself. What really makes the tavern the heart of the medieval village isn't the mead, smoke-stained walls, or the wobbly chairs. It's the people and the chaos. So lively and messy you have to ask, is this a place to eat, or a stage play mixed with a wrestling ring? A medieval tavern was a living social network. All classes crammed together, rich or poor, clean or filthy. Peasants, the majority. They came to forget muddy fields and crushing taxes, hair unkempt, clothes smelling of livestock, but their eyes lit up at the sight of a mug. Mercenaries, rusty armor, dull swords, mouths full of war stories, true or not. They spoke twice as loud, laughed 3 times harder, and often introduced themselves by showing scars. Merchants, fewer, but noticeable. Their money bags jingled, their cloaks had colours, faded ones. Wherever they sat, they drew attention. Minstrels and storytellers, some with a lute missing strings, some with a sack of torn poems. They earned a few coins through song, jokes, or retelling old tales everyone had heard but still clapped for. Vagrants, beggars, not rare. They slipped in, hunting for leftover bread or waiting for a drunk to pass out so they could snatch a purse. Stray nobles, rare, but possible. A curious landlord, or a knight passing through. They usually covered their faces, not wanting to be seen drinking among peasants. One night in the tavern was society in miniature, beggar to noble, all crammed into one smoky, noisy, low-ceilinged room, and strangely enough, all felt at home. Now picture standing in the middle of an orchestra where every player uses a different instrument, no rhythm, all at full volume. That's tavern sound. The roaring laughter of soldiers, curses in 10 local dialects, chairs creaking under shifting weight, conversations overlapping, crops, fights, horses for sale. Occasionally interrupted by the sound of someone vomiting in the corner. Together, it formed a medieval symphony your ears had to adapt to. If you came seeking peace, sorry you chose the wrong universe. In the tavern, the mouth was the strongest weapon. Storytelling. A peasant bragging about killing a wild boar, actually a runaway pig. A mercenary recalling an epic battle, actually an argument with a gatekeeper. A merchant boasting of a deadly, dangerous trade trip, actually haggling over melons with a widow. Scars, teeth, purses, everyone bragged about something. Bragging often led to arguments. My scar is bigger, my purse is fatter, my teeth are still all here. And soon, boom, trouble. Flirting, part of the stage act. A drunk soldier leaning toward the serving girl, whispering lines so cheesy flowers would wilt. She, used to it, usually just smirked and sometimes slapped him. And of course, the bard. He hugged his lute, strumming notes that sounded like a catfight. But in the tavern, who cared? His songs were tragic love tales or heroic ballads, drowned in whistles and table pounding. Sometimes, people broke into a folk dance, stomping feet, shaking the floor, straw flying, mugs spilling. Other games, dice, cards, or dumb bets like, which one of us falls off the chair first? Every game ended in laughter or shouting, and no tavern was complete without a fight. It was practically part of the menu. Causes, cheating at dice, fighting over a seat, or simply looking at someone the wrong way. Weapons, chairs, tables, wooden mugs, even rock-hard bread. Knives and swords were rarely drawn, they risked permanent banishment. The scene, shouts, splintering furniture, someone flying through the air and landing in the straw. Meanwhile, in the corner, someone kept slurping stew like nothing happened. The funny part? Once the brawl ended, both sides often clinked mugs again. Why? Because they'd see each other tomorrow anyway. And when the beer hit, the most common activity was passing out. Some slumped over tables, leaving drool puddles. Some sprawled on the floor, straw as their mattress. Some even dozed. Mid-sentence, stories left hanging like books missing the last page. Snores joined shouts, blending into a harmony only a tavern could make. Every tavern had its regular characters, as if sent by the god of drink. The braggart. Every line starts with, I once. The lightweight, drunk after half a mug, already singing off-key. The deep sleeper, still on the floor come morning, glued to the straw. The sharp-tongued serving girl, serving ale with one hand, slapping regulars with the other. The tragic storyteller, always acting serious, though no one listened. They were the tavern's soul, not noble, but essential. And don't forget, taverns were also news hubs. War, harvests, taxes, all discussed. Rumours flourished. The blacksmith's daughter ran off with a knight. The village well is cursed by a witch. There's treasure buried in the woods. Some true, most false. Who cared? It fueled conversation. In a world with little writing, taverns were living newspapers, and every drunk was a non-stop reporter. Look inside a tavern, and you saw both humour and hardship. A poor man laughing wildly after winning at dice. while the loser gritted his teeth. A widow telling her bitter story, the whole room silent, then breaking into laughter again. An orphan boy asleep in the corner, while mercenaries shouted over cards. The tavern crammed every emotion into one room. Laughter, tears, song, fights, and snores. You think the most dangerous place in the Middle Ages was the battlefield with spears, sharp swords, and volleys of arrows? Wrong. Out there was discipline, formation, trumpets. The place truly chaotic, lawless, and most likely to cost you a tooth was the village tavern. Yes, one night here could give you more action than a small skirmish. No grand reason needed. In the tavern, the smallest thing could ignite a fight. A glance in the wrong place. Stare 3 seconds too long at the guy at the next table, and he growls. What are you looking at? Curtain up. A spilled mug on someone's cloak. In a world where laundry was a luxury, that was an insult to honor. The gambling game. As soon as the dice stopped rolling, the swearing started, and soon after came the sound of a chair breaking. Flirting with the wrong person. One smile, one stray line, and suddenly you're public enemy number one to a drunk with a loud mouth and a heavy fist. In other words, the tavern was a furnace, waiting for the tiniest spark. And the funny thing was, nobody wanted to put it out. The script was predictable. 2 men start growling, voices rising. Everyone else pauses their meal, their laughter, turning to watch. Free entertainment. One man leaps up, chair crashing to the floor. The other slams the table or smashes a mug on the ground. The fight officially begins. No referee, no rules. The audience sometimes cheered, sometimes jumped in. And suddenly, from 2 men, it was 10. You imagine swords, axes, maces? Not quite. Weapons of the tavern were whatever was at hand. Wooden chairs, solid, heavy, dramatic when swung. Tables, flipped into makeshift shields. Mugs and jugs, thrown with accuracy, leaving memorable lumps. Rock-hard bread. Yes, hard enough to be ammo. Fists and teeth. The classics. Never out of style. The image of a drunk soldier swinging a chair, charging into an opponent to the roar of the crowd that was more common than knights charging into battle. Once a brawl started, the room became tragicomedy theatre. One man slammed to the floor, sliding across damp straw. Another lunged forward, only to trip on a mug, face-planting into a table. Shouts, laughter, curses blending together. Someone launched across the room, landing in a pile of broken chairs. And strangely, the atmosphere wasn't grim. The crowd treated it like entertainment. People laughed, cheered, even bet on the fighters. 1 coin on the fat guy, he looks strong. If the battlefields had formations, taverns had their own tactics. The throw a chair first, ask later style, the classic. The grab hair, slam head on table style, especially effective against drunks. The temporary alliance style. 2 strangers teaming up against a common foe, dissolving right after. The stealth style. Someone crawling under a table, waiting it out, then reappearing like nothing happened. Above all, the flying chair style was immortal. No medieval movie is complete without it. After 15 minutes of chaos, the usual result was a few broken noses, a few teeth left on the floor, 1 table reduced to firewood, straw soaked with blood. And then, the strangest part, many who had been beaten got up smiling. They clinked mugs with their opponents, as if it was all just a warm-up. In the tavern, violence wasn't always hatred. It was part of the community experience. Think the innkeeper stopped it? Not a chance. He knew better. At most, he shouted, "Don't break any more of my tables." Then he went back to wiping mugs, not making them cleaner, while letting customers settle their differences. When things cooled, the innkeeper had his routine. Collect the unbroken mugs, set up a few chairs, and add damages to the bill. In village memory, some brawls became legend. The one that lasted until sunrise won only by the dog, who ate all the scraps on the floor. The one where the widow from the next village fought, wielding a broom, knocking out 3 burly men. The one where so many chairs broke that villagers joked, "Free firewood for soup tonight." These tales passed by word of mouth, woven into local lore, as much a part of history as any battlefield victory. In a place where people spoke different dialects, often not understanding each other, Violence became the universal language. No translation needed. One punch, one kick, everyone got it. Chroniclers joked, "If you want to see the true nature of medieval people, don't watch knights on horseback, watch a tavern when a brawl breaks out." And the best part? For those not fighting, violence was pure entertainment. Kids peeked through the door, cracks, giggling as chairs flew. Old men nodded. Back in my day, I fought like that too. Merchants placed bets on who'd fall first. The whole village saw brawls not as tragedy, but comedy. The next day, they retold it with excitement, like they'd just seen a hit play. You've drunk, eaten, shouted, and maybe even taken a flying chair to the shoulder. Now your body gives in, and you realize you need a place to lie down. Congratulations, you're about to enter the lodging service of the medieval tavern, an experience any modern hotel critic would call a human disaster, but with its own style. Forget private rooms with soft beds, cotton sheets, and scented pillows. Staying overnight in a tavern meant sleeping wherever there was space. Common room. Many people crammed together in one small chamber, packed like dried fish. Shared bed. No one asked who you wanted to sleep with. First come, first served. Floor. If beds ran out, you got the luxury of straw piles or the fireplace corner. Innkeepers treated beds like treasure. Want one? Pay extra. But even if you paid, you had no idea when the straw had last been changed. Beds in medieval taverns were wobbly wooden frames stuffed with straw in a sack. Wooden frame, squeaked with every move. One big yawn, and it might snap. Straw mattress. At first fine, but after a few nights, clumped into rocks. Perfect paradise for fleas and lice. Blankets. Thick woolen cloth. Heavy reeking of smoke and sweat soaked through generations. When you climbed in, you weren't sure if you were resting or auditioning for Survivor Bug Edition. The fun part was sleeping with strangers. You never knew who'd be next to you. A peasant snoring like thunder. A mercenary clutching his sword. A merchant dreaming of kingship, money pouch tucked under his pillow. In pitch black, you heard everything. Snores, teeth grinding, sleep talking. Occasionally, a random arm smacked your face. No apologies, everyone slept like the dead. And you can't talk about tavern sleep without fleas and lice. They lived in straw, blankets, wood cracks. At night, they held buffet banquets on your skin. You scratched until raw, but by morning, you rose as if nothing happened. Medieval people were so used to it, they called them the default service fee. Some even joked, "If the lice didn't bite me tonight, I must have slept in the wrong bed." You think nights were quiet? Think again. It was a chaotic orchestra. Snores, from deep drum rumbles to shrill flute tones. Sleep talk, random words, sometimes mysterious, sometimes obscene. Teeth grinding, endless percussion. Wind whistling through cracks, mingling with firewood crackles. And sometimes, someone vomiting from too much ale. Newcomers tossed and turned, but regulars slept like babies. The sleeping space was a cocktail of smells. Smoke clinging from the hearth, sweat from a long day's labour, damp wool, never dried, rotting straw, and surprise notes, foot odour from your neighbour, or cheese tucked under a blanket. Breathing here was like sipping a scent cocktail you never ordered. Sleeping in taverns was also a gamble with your belongings. Merchants might wake to find their purse gone. Soldiers might discover their weapons changed owners. Some tied pouches to their bodies, or kept swords under pillows, but that only made sleeping more stressful. Thieves worked silently, and victims woke unsure if they'd been robbed or just too drunk to remember. When rooms filled, guests crashed in the hall. Chairs, tables, and straw floors turned into beds. One guy passed out face first on the table, waking with carvings imprinted on his forehead. Another curled under a table, like a temporary mummy. Some slept near the fireplace. Warm but risky wool clothes sometimes caught sparks. Many didn't pay for lodging at all, they just slept where they drank. Morning in the tavern dorm looked like post-apocalypse. Bodies sprawled, straw glued to hair. Someone rubbing eyes, searching for shoes only to find them soaked in last night's beer. Others whining about swollen legs from bites. A few couldn't remember who they'd slept next to. The smell was worse than at night, all that human breath condensed after hours. For modern people, tavern sleep was a nightmare, but for medieval folk, it was normal. Snoring, fleas, cramped quarters, just part of life. They were used to waking with headaches, sore backs, and missing belongings. Above all, they accepted the truth. Sleeping in taverns was a democratic rest. Everyone suffered equally. Some travellers even said it was the fastest way to understand life. You didn't really know the Middle Ages until you lay crammed between 10 strangers, bitten by lice, breathing every smell imaginable, and woke up with straw stuck to your face. You think a medieval tavern was just a place to drink beer, chew on bread hard as stone, and sleep packed in straw? Think again, that was only the tip of the iceberg. In truth, the tavern was the social centre of the whole community, a place where news, politics, marriage, economy, and even religion sometimes got dragged in. In other words, the tavern was the unofficial town hall, the people's university, and the beer-stained social network of the Middle Ages. First, understand this. The tavern was where news spread faster than the wind. A soldier returned from battle to told his story, adding some extra gore to the whole village was updated. A merchant came from the city to shared prices of salt, wool, fish, to villagers adjusted their harvest plans. A drunk shouted, "The blacksmith's cow can fly!" To the next day, the whole village debated it. Every official announcement and every ridiculous rumour passed through the tavern. In an age with no newspapers, no radio, no Twitter, this was the breaking news channel. Don't think medieval folk only talked about farming. In the tavern, many village political decisions were made when everyone was half drunk. Who would represent them in paying taxes? Decided after 5 men clinked mugs. Who would serve as the Lord's soldier? Whoever lost at dice last night? Who got grazing rights? Settled in shouting matches, with the innkeeper as referee, though he only cared who would pay for the broken table. In short, the tavern was an unofficial parliament. Village macro policies were shaped amid noise, beer stench, and hands still greasy from stew. Today, if you need a job, you open LinkedIn. In the Middle Ages, you stepped into a tavern. Mercenaries looked for contracts. Craftsmen searched for clients. Merchants recruited porters. Even lords sent men to recruit soldiers. The tavern was a living job market. Whoever needed workers, whoever had strength to sell, just shouted it out. And if a bard strummed in the background, the deal sounded even grander. Want to know who was cheating, who was stealing, who was in debt? Step into the tavern. This was where rumours ballooned like soap bubbles. The weaver's daughter went out last night to 5 minutes later she was in love with a witch. The blacksmith lost a chicken too by morning. The village believed it had flown into the monastery. A noble visited to the village gossiped for weeks, each time adding another outrageous detail. No exaggeration, the tavern was the only press office, with the most creative content department in history. Think, love only bloomed in castles? Wrong. The tavern was also where drunken Cupid shot arrows everywhere. Many couples met here, dancing folk songs under flickering candles. Small weddings were discussed or even sealed with a few mugs of beer. On the flip side, many breakups happened here too, ended with a slap across the face. The tavern was the medieval dating app except with smoke, snores, and the constant risk of a flying chair. No Netflix, no TikTok. The tavern was where people went for entertainment. Bards told stories. The crowd laughed, cried, sometimes tossed coins. Gambling, dice, cards, or betting on who'd pass out first. Folk dancing. Once drunk enough, anyone was a dancer. All village entertainment poured into the tavern. In other words, it was theatre, casino, and circus rolled into one. Funny enough, even priests sometimes stopped by. They sat in a corner, sipping weak beer, listening to villagers spill sins. Someone joked, "The tavern is the unofficial confessional, except sins are shouted out loud for everyone to hear." Of course, the church disapproved. But the truth? People felt closer confessing under ale than inside cold stone walls. For young men, the tavern was where they learned life's lessons. How to drink without collapsing. How to negotiate while drunk. How to avoid being pickpocketed. How sometimes losing at dice meant serving in the army for the whole table. No textbook taught faster than the tavern. It was the most practical school of the Middle Ages. When one village feuded with another, the tavern was the meeting ground. Both sides sat, growled, clinked mugs, hurled insults, and sometimes reconciled. If not, at least they knew who'd be fighting tomorrow. Sometimes inter-village marriages were arranged here too. A girl from village A, a boy from village B, families talked it over, right at the table where someone else was snoring drunk. Every tavern was the memory bank of the community. Here, tales of legendary fights were told and retold, each time with new details. Here, names of heroes and fools alike were carved into tables and walls. Here, villagers recalled ancestors, past glories, and sorrows. The tavern was where local history was preserved, not on parchment, but in drunken storytelling. You've sat with me in that smoky room, tasted the patchy pottage stew, clinked mugs of murky beer, witnessed flying chairs, fallen teeth, and the cramped sleep on damp straw. By now, you might ask, so what did the medieval tavern really leave us? Was it just a filthy, noisy room with nothing worth remembering? Look closer, and you'll see. The tavern wasn't just where people drank to forget life. It was the beating heart of medieval society. A rough heart, but one that pumped strong, keeping communities alive through deadly winters and endless wars. And strangely, when we look at the present, we still see its shadow in coffee shops, bars, even on social media today. In the 21st century, you opened Facebook or TikTok for the latest updates. In the 14th century, you stepped into a tavern, sat on a wobbly chair, and listened to a drunk shout. The English just burned the next village. The only difference? Facebook has a share button. The tavern had the farmer's mouth, spreading the word to the entire village. And medieval rumours spread no slower than a modern viral tweet. Today, politicians meet in closed rooms, in suits, to debate policy. In the Middle Ages, many village destiny decisions were made around smoke-stained wooden tables, mugs spilling over, and curses echoing off the walls. You laugh? Look around today. How many important decisions are still made at dinner tables, in luxury bars, or during late-night meetings? Perhaps humans never escaped the truth. Politics and alcohol have always walked hand in hand. No recorders, no newspapers, no cameras. The tavern was where history was told distorted, exaggerated, but alive in ways monastery manuscripts never were. Today we have podcasts, talk shows, online forums, but the essence is the same. Humans need a place to tell stories, to listen, to turn memory into shared memory. From rickety tavern benches to modern podcast studios, the distance isn't as far as we think. Medieval folk entered taverns for food and drink. We go to fast food joints, coffee shops, restaurants for the same. But hunger was only the excuse. The real reason was connection. Today, we meet at Starbucks to discuss work, catch up with friends, or kill time. 700 years ago, medieval villagers did the same, just swapping lattes for murky ale and vanilla-scented tables for smoke-stained ones. In taverns, masks came off. Boasters, cowards, heroes, liars, all revealed after a few gulps. And you know what? Today isn't so different. Modern bars, dance floors, even anonymous chat rooms, they're still places where people show their truest selves. Technology changes, lights shine brighter, but human instinct stays. We gather in crowds to both hide ourselves and to be ourselves. You've seen the crowds at soccer matches, the roar at UFC fights, or the fiery arguments on Twitter. Then you understand why tavern brawls were considered group entertainment. Humans always crave drama, conflict, spectacle, energy release. Today, we pay tickets for combat sports. Back then, villagers paid with a mug of ale and front row seats to two drunks arguing. Funny enough, those cramped tavern dorms weren't far from today's budget hostels. Pay a little, and you get squeaky bunk beds, crowded rooms, and the risk of stolen goods. The only difference, straw swapped for thin mattresses, lice for weak Wi-Fi. But those inconveniences built shared experience stories you'd remember, just like villagers remembered nights crammed together on tavern straw. Today, we have malls, cafes, bars, restaurants, stadiums, movie theatres, but really, they're all modern versions of the medieval tavern, places to meet, exchange, and build collective memory. That smoky, creaky tavern teaches us one thing: humans cannot live apart. We always need a place dirty or fancy to connect. Without taverns, medieval villages might have had no heart, and people would have felt lost inside their own communities. Think about it. The last time you sat with friends in a cafe, a street bar, or even a Discord server, What did you see? Laughter, gossip, arguments, plans, sometimes even conflict. Isn't that exactly what the medieval tavern was? Swap beer for bubble tea, pottage for fast food, wooden chairs for plastic stools, and the essence stays the same. Humans still need their taverns to breathe together, to forget together, and to remember together. If you've ever experienced a modern tavern of your own full of laughter, noise, and a bit of chaos, share it down in the comments. And if you want to keep exploring more fascinating hidden corners of medieval life with me, don't forget to hit that follow button, because this journey has only just begun. One blazing morning on the deserts of Egypt, more than 3,000 years ago. In that golden, burning light, a name rang out inside the royal palace. Neferuaten Nefertiti. In ancient Egyptian, that name meant, the beautiful one has come. But who had come? From where? And why was she called that? That was the first mystery, and the doorway into the life of one of history's most enigmatic queens. The name Nefertiti was no ordinary name. In ancient Egyptian culture, a name was identity, protection, and declaration all at once. Egyptians believed that when a name was spoken, it carried the power to sustain a soul for eternity. And yet, Nefertiti felt like an unfinished story. It didn't just describe beauty, it declared, "This beautiful one was not born here, but had come." That single verb, come, is the fragment that made generations of scholars scratch their heads. Did Nefertiti arrive from some foreign land, outside the Egyptian court? Her name became an invitation, a riddle. When ancient Egyptians spoke it, they were not only praising beauty, but hinting that this woman carried difference, bringing a new wind as she stepped onto history's stage. The most common theory says Nefertiti was the daughter of Ai, a powerful official who later became pharaoh. Ai wasn't of royal blood, but he held major offices under Amenhotep III and Akhenaten. If Nefertiti was his daughter, it would explain why she became queen, a political bond between the throne and a powerful family. But history never clearly records bloodlines. It's speculation, pieced together from carvings and scattered texts. Egyptologists found depictions of Ai close to the royal family, sometimes connected to the princesses, but no line stating he was her father. Still, the theory fascinates, painting Nefertiti as a bridge between royal and official, both inside and outside. Another dramatic theory suggests Nefertiti was foreign-born, perhaps a Mitanni princess. Mitanni was a great Mesopotamian kingdom, sending daughters to Egypt to cement alliances. If true, the beautiful one has come makes perfect sense. She was the one who came, carrying strangeness and mystery. Imagine a foreign princess stepping off a boat on the Nile, crowds staring in curiosity only to rise, years later, as the face of one of Egypt's greatest religious revolutions. Of course, no absolute proof exists. But the uncertainty only fuels her legend. A figure half hidden, as if she had been sent from another realm. Strangely, no contemporary record clearly notes Nefertiti's origin. No stelae name her parents, no temples mention her family. Other queens were linked to dynasties and noble lines. Nefertiti, by contrast, appeared out of nowhere. One day, she was simply there beside Akhenaten, sharing the throne. That silence feels deliberate, like a shadow meant to cover. Perhaps later rulers tried to erase her name after her controversial reforms. Or, perhaps she was never official enough in bloodline to be fully recorded. Either way, the ambiguity turned her into the rootless queen, a beauty emerging from history's mist. Beyond Nefertiti, she also bore a longer name, Neferuaten Nefertiti, the beautiful one of Aten, the beautiful one has come. Aten was the sun god Akhenaten worshipped. This name blended personal and divine, beauty and religion, mortal and sacred. It showed her role, not only queen, but a spiritual figure, bridging God and human. Her name praised not just her face, but her role as a herald of change, the one who came to embody a new God and a new order. In Egyptian society, beauty was praised, yes, but to embed it in a royal name was rare. It made Nefertiti a living symbol of an ideal. Beauty as political power. Picture it. Every time Egyptians spoke her name, they proclaimed that beauty itself had appeared, entered, and changed their world. That beauty wasn't only physical, it was strangeness, difference, an irresistible force. In modern terms, the name was a brand. If Cleopatra later defined power through seduction, Nefertiti defined herself from the start. beauty as a symbol stepping in from afar. Remarkably, Amarna art the era of Akhenaten depicted Nefertiti more than almost any queen. She appeared in family scenes, cradling children. She appeared in rituals, standing equal to Pharaoh. And of course, her bust discovered in 1912 became a global masterpiece, the face of immortal beauty. All of it reinforced the sense that the beautiful one has come wasn't just flattery, it was carved into the minds of the people. So where did Nefertiti truly come from? Was she A's daughter, a foreign princess, or simply an Egyptian woman swept into history by destiny? No one knows for certain. Modern scholars still debate. Each archaeological discovery sparks new theories, but never closure. That uncertainty is what makes Nefertiti different. If she had a clear lineage, perhaps she would have been just another queen. But her unknown origin left a blank space for humanity's imagination to fill. In the history of ancient Egypt, few royal couples were depicted as often as Akhenaten and Nefertiti, not only because they ruled in a time of upheaval, but because their partnership was bound to one of the rarest religious revolutions in thousands of years of Nile civilization. To understand Nefertiti, we must see her at Akhenaten's side, not as a silent wife, but as an ally, a co-ruler, a co-creator. Akhenaten, before his throne name was Amenhotep IV, was no ordinary pharaoh. Unlike his predecessors who reinforced tradition, he chose to challenge Egypt's entire religious system. He declared that only Aten, the sun god in the form of a radiant disk, was supreme, denying the power of the old gods, especially Amun. Politically, this was nearly suicidal, as the temple of Amun in Thebes had roots as deep as trees. In that context, Nefertiti was not a quiet shadow behind the throne, but a woman standing beside him, appearing with him in every ritual, every depiction as if they were two halves of one reign. If we look at Amarna art, the unique style of Akhenaten's era, we see the difference. Nefertiti did not stand behind the king, but beside him. In many reliefs, she and Akhenaten lift their hands together, receiving Aten's rays, both equally blessed by divine light. On temple walls, she is not just present as queen, but sometimes wears the pharaoh's crown, holding the same symbols of power. In some scenes, she even appears alone, performing religious rites once reserved only for pharaohs. These images were no artistic whim. They were political declarations. Akhenaten did not rule alone. He had Nefertiti as co-ruler, sharing the burden of revolution. In the new religion Akhenaten built, Aten was not human-shaped, but only a sun disk casting rays. That left a gap. If the god had no form, who would stand as the bridge between God and people? The answer was Akhenaten and Nefertiti. They were the sacred couple, standing directly under Aten's light. They became living embodiments of the link between humanity and the divine. In ritual, Nefertiti was carved not as a passive queen, but as a high priestess, sometimes even surpassing the traditional priesthood that had been stripped of power. This was unprecedented in Egyptian history. A queen not just as companion, but as spiritual leader alongside the pharaoh. Amarna art also revealed intimacy. Reliefs showed Akhenaten and Nefertiti sitting together, cradling their children, kissing them under Aten's glow. This was a stark break from rigid, distant tradition. It sent a message. Power lay not only in ritual, but in family, in love, in shared life. Nefertiti, then, was more than a ceremonial queen. She was a true partner, sharing crown and hearth alike. One of Akhenaten's boldest acts was abandoning Thebes and building an entirely new capital. Akhetaten, now Amarna, horizon of Aten. In every carving, Nefertiti appears beside him at the founding, the offerings, the dedication of temples. She was not a witness, she was a co-founder, laying the city's first stones. Imagine the pair standing in the desert, the sun pouring down, hands raised, Aten's rays embracing them. Not just religious imagery, but a political manifesto. Nefertiti, at the heart of transformation. A religious revolution was never only about faith, it was about power. When Akhenaten cut Amun's dominance, he faced fierce resistance. At that moment, Nefertiti was the softer yet no less powerful banner of legitimacy. With her striking beauty, she became the face of the new faith. By standing as equal, she softened the image of a lone, autocratic pharaoh, making it appear as the couple's consensus. By joining public rituals, she convinced the people Aten's blessing was for queen as well as king. To the common eye, this wasn't one man against tradition, it was a sacred pair, united in action. Some modern scholars ask, was Nefertiti merely the right hand, or did she truly reign as Akhenaten's equal? Evidence. Carvings show her wearing the blue crown of Pharaoh, wielding scepter, even smiting enemies poses, once reserved only for kings. Some believe she was crowned co-regent, a second pharaoh beside Akhenaten. Certain texts hint that the name Neferuaten was used as a royal name, possibly Nefertiti ruling in her own right. If true, her role was not just at his side, but on the throne itself, a rare case in Egypt's long history. Regardless of how much power she held, Nefertiti became the symbol of change. She was the face of Aten's faith. She was the centerpiece of Amarna art. She co-founded the new capital. She was the balance that softened Akhenaten's extremity in the people's eyes. Her role was not dependence, but partnership extraordinary in a culture where pharaohs stood alone. Perhaps the most iconic image summing up Nefertiti's place beside Akhenaten is Aten's rays themselves. On the reliefs, Aten's light falls not only on the king but on the queen as well. Each ray ends with a tiny hand touching them, gifting life, power, and divinity. In symbolic language, that meant Aten acknowledged them both equally. And so, Nefertiti did not just stand beside Akhenaten, she stood with him under the sun, sharing its glow. When we look at the immortal bust of Nefertiti, we often think only of beauty. The high forehead, the long neck, the cold gaze, the great blue crown. But if we look past the carved features, behind that face lies an intricate family and a tangled web of power. For an Egyptian queen, family wasn't just private life. It was a political weapon, both shield and spear, to secure her position. Nefertiti and Akhenaten had at least 6 daughters recorded in Amarna art: Meritaten, Meketaten, Ankesenpaten, later Ankesenamun, wife of Tutankhamun, Neferuaten Tasherit, Neferur, and Setependre. What was unique? Never before had a royal dynasty been depicted so intensely as a family. In reliefs we see Nefertiti and Akhenaten embracing their children, placing them on their laps, princesses playing beneath Aten's rays, their braided hair falling over their shoulders, scenes of daily life, like a modern family replacing the distant solemnity of traditional Egyptian art. These images weren't just humanizing, they were political strategy, displaying a sacred family blessed by Aten. The 6 princesses weren't only daughters, but living emblems of continuity and legitimacy. What's strange is that no princes appear beside Nefertiti in any official depictions. 6 daughters are mentioned, but no sons. This sparked theories. Did Akhenaten and Nefertiti have no male heirs? Were sons born but died young, erased from art? Or was the heir Tutankhamun himself but his true mother unclear? Whatever the reason, the absence of princes was a political risk. In a patriarchal monarchy, no male heir meant a fragile throne. Thus, the 6 daughters became political pawns, each one a potential bridge to alliances of power or faith. The eldest, Meritaten, appears most often in art close to her parents, sometimes standing in for her mother in rituals. This suggests Nefertiti didn't just show off daughters as decoration, but gave them roles of weight. Meritaten may have been trained as her mother's second self, a queen-in-waiting, prepared to rule if needed. Some evidence hints that after Akhenaten's death, Meritaten even acted as queen or co-ruler briefly. If true, then Nefertiti's legacy of female power was passed directly to her daughter. Princess Ankesenpaten is notable as she later became Ankesenamun, wife of Tutankhamun, the most famous boy king of Egypt. That marriage wasn't just affection, it was politics, linking the Amarna line with the new heir, keeping the flow of power intact. Through this, Nefertiti's strategy is clear. She used her daughters as bridges to secure that. Even if the dynasty shifted, the Aten bloodline remained tied to the throne. In Egyptian society, the great royal wife, mother of the next king, often held immense power. If one of Nefertiti's 6 daughters became queen or mother of a pharaoh, then Nefertiti herself wouldn't just be queen of the past, she'd be a shadow ruler of the future. This helps explain why many scholars suspect that after Akhenaten's death, Nefertiti may have seized power herself, or at least steered the throne through her children. Beyond her daughters, Nefertiti's strength came from her wider kin. If she truly was daughter of Ai, the powerful official who later became pharaoh, then she stood inside a layered network of influence. I, a political pillar, experienced in court. T, great royal wife of Amenhotep III, possibly Nefertiti's aunt. Other relatives embedded in the administration. Through this, Nefertiti never stood alone. She embodied a family dynasty interwoven with the crown. Nefertiti and Akhenaten created a ruling couple, model unprecedented in Egyptian history, and their six-daughter household became the living proof of that model. Each time Nefertiti appeared with her children in Aten's rituals, she wasn't just showing maternal joy, she was sending a message. This dynasty has a future, a line of succession, and Aten blesses not just the king, but the entire bloodline. Her power didn't come from standing behind the throne, but from standing with her husband, with her daughters, under the sun. But Nefertiti's family wasn't spared tragedy. Some princesses died young, and funeral scenes appear on reliefs rare in Egyptian art. These images were both personal and political, showing that even the sacred family faced fate's cruelty, yet turning grief into public ritual, allowing the people to share sorrow and stay bound to the royal household. Even pain became a tool of power. In truth, Nefertiti may have invented the use of family as political symbol. Six daughters proved abundance and continuity. Scenes of embracing and kissing children proclaimed, "This family is blessed by Aten." Depictions of mourning made her a human mother, closer to the people. In the ancient world, where art was the only media, Nefertiti used her family as masterful political communication. Seen from today, we might smile. Isn't this exactly what modern leaders do? Appearing with spouses and children, projecting happy family images, sending messages of stability and legitimacy. It proves, though 3,000 years apart, politics still runs on familiar symbols. And Nefertiti, with six princesses under the sun, wrote one of history's earliest chapters in that art. In the final years of the Amarna dynasty, when Aten's sunlight still blazed across temple walls, when Nefertiti's daughters were still carved in scenes of family joy, suddenly, Nefertiti vanished. No inscription records her death, no tomb has been found, no official text mentions her after a certain point. She, the woman once everywhere from rituals to intimate family scenes, the one who wore the pharaoh's crown and stood equal with Akhenaten, beneath Aten's rays suddenly dissolved from history like a shadow erased. This is one of ancient Egypt's greatest mysteries, the disappearance of Nefertiti. One theory suggests Nefertiti died of plague, struck down by sudden illness in chaotic years. Egypt at the time faced epidemics and waves of disease. If she truly died this way, the court may have hidden it, not wishing to show weakness while the Aten reforms still struggled. Yet the total silence in official records makes this difficult. Why would a queen so prominent, partner to Pharaoh in every ritual, receive no monumental funeral, no commemoration at all? Another, more dramatic theory. Nefertiti never disappeared. She changed her name and role, becoming a pharaoh herself after Akhenaten's death or decline. The mysterious name Neferuaten, found in certain inscriptions, may have been Nefertiti in royal form. If true, she did not vanish, but stepped into power, ruling alone in the turbulent gap before Tutankhamun. But if that's so, why did official history bury it? Perhaps because later dynasties sought to erase all memory of Akhenaten and Nefertiti's heresy, branding them as a chapter best forgotten. Some archaeologists believe Nefertiti became Smenkhkare, a shadowy pharaoh briefly noted after Akhenaten. Smenkhkare may have been co-ruler or successor, but his identity is blurred. Some argue this was Nefertiti under another name, crowned and legitimized. Reliefs show a crowned figure with feminine features, fueling the speculation. If true, Nefertiti's disappearance wasn't death, but transformation. Queen into pharaoh, consort into ruler. Yet others argue Smenkhkare was real, a prince, perhaps Akhenaten's son or kin, whose brief reign became tangled with Nefertiti's fading trace. In the haze, their names overlap, blurring the story. Modern archaeology deepens the puzzle. Excavations in the Valley of the Kings uncovered unfinished tombs, defaced mummies, overwritten inscriptions. Some scholars suggest Nefertiti may rest in a hidden chamber, buried in secrecy due to later hatred of Aten's revolution. Hopes once ran high that KV-62, the tomb of Tutankhamun, might conceal a hidden passage to Nefertiti's burial. Yet no proof has come. She seems still out there waiting to be unearthed, or swallowed forever by time. Another theory claims she did not die during Akhenaten's reign at all, but fell from favor. Perhaps political conflict, rivalries in the harem, or cracks in the art and reforms she once embodied led to her removal. But then, why would her image vanish so completely when she had been portrayed as equal to Pharaoh himself? How could such a central figure be erased without a trace? The only certainty is this. From a point onward, Nefertiti's name disappears. Reliefs no longer mention her. Amarna art drops her image, showing only Akhenaten and Aten, then successors. That void is not just absence, it is a shadow in history, a gap where every theory fits, but none commands the truth. And perhaps that silence is what makes Nefertiti eternal. She has no tomb like Tutankhamun, no clear death record like Cleopatra. Instead, she left behind only one perfect bust, and behind it, a chasm of silence. And that silence is her loudest echo. A queen once standing in Aten's light, then swallowed in darkness, as if the sun itself had suddenly gone out. More than 3,000 years have passed since the name Nefertiti echoed through the sunlit halls of Akhenaten, yet her legacy has never lain quietly beneath Egypt's golden sands. Though her true origins, her death, and her resting place remain forever obscure, Nefertiti's image burns on like an undying flame etched into humanity's imagination more than any other queen, save Cleopatra. People may forget carved inscriptions of conquests, they may lose track of successive pharaohs, but no one can erase the bust of Nefertiti, the pupilless eyes, the immortal delicate face, the towering blue crown like sunlight turned to stone. That single piece, discovered by chance in an Amarna workshop in 1912, was enough to lift her from the shadows of archaeology back into the heart of global culture. It isn't just an artifact, it's a declaration that beauty and power need no words to endure. Nefertiti's legacy isn't only in art. She and Akhenaten dared to do what few ever attempted: challenge a religious system that had ruled Egypt for millennia. Though the Aten revolution collapsed after their disappearance, its echoes still stretch far. It proved that even in a civilization seemingly unshakable, there could be moments of rupture, people bold enough to imagine the gods differently, to redistribute divine power, to focus light on a single symbol. In that fleeting moment, Nefertiti was more than queen. She was the face of a spiritual revolution. Though history later erased her name, that memory cannot be undone. Today, when we speak of the Amarna reforms, it is not only Akhenaten we recall, but also Nefertiti, the woman who stood equal beside him in every ritual, the one who let Aten's rays fall upon her as living proof that women, too, could stand at the very center of religious power. Her influence also lies in how she used family and image as instruments of authority. Reliefs showing her kissing her daughters, seated beside Akhenaten beneath Aten's light, weren't simply tender scenes, they were political messages. They reshaped how queens were seen, no longer a shadow behind the pharaoh, but a power in her own right, an equal half of the dynasty. Those images, forgotten for millennia, still inspire scholars, artists, even feminist movements today, who see in Nefertiti an ancient symbol of equality and female strength. Yet perhaps her strongest legacy lies in imagination. It is her mysterious disappearance that transformed her into an endless legend. She is both present in stone and dissolved into sand. She is both tender mother in reliefs and enigmatic pharaoh in speculation. She may have died quietly in plague, or donned the crown to rule as Smenkhkare. That ambiguity prevents her from ever being trapped in a single story. Each generation rewrites Nefertiti in its own way. To the 19th century, she was the symbol of exotic Eastern beauty. To the 20th, she was an artistic masterpiece removed from Egypt, sparking endless debate. To the 21st, she is a global icon, living in museums, films, literature, and in modern conversations about gender and power. Even in modern life, her name stretches beyond archaeology. It has become a brand, an inspiration for fashion, music, cosmetics, architecture. Anywhere people want to invoke the fusion of beauty and authority, they invoke Nefertiti. She became the Cleopatra before Cleopatra, paving the way for the idea that women could be more than queens in the shadows, they could be central figures in history. Nefertiti's influence also reshaped how we understand Egypt. Before the bust was found, the Amarna dynasty was little more than an odd blip in history, a brief heretical interlude. But that face forced the world to look again. Archaeologists dug deeper, asked more questions, and uncovered crucial pieces of a reign nearly erased. In many ways, it was Nefertiti who pulled Amarna back from oblivion, compelling humanity to view the past with greater nuance. And finally, her legacy endures in the immortality of beauty. A beauty untouched by time, undimmed by the erasure of later dynasties, unscattered by desert storms. It transcends borders from Egypt's sands to Berlin, from museums to cinema, from ancient stone to modern imagination. It is proof that beauty, when fused with power and mystery, can outlast any army, any dynasty, any prayer carved in stone. Nefertiti's legacy, then, is not only in what she did in life, but in her haunting presence after death. A queen may be forgotten by history, but a symbol never island. And Nefertiti, from the moment she stepped into Aten's light until today, remains a symbol of beauty, of power, of mystery, and of humanity's endless yearning to touch the unknowable. In the vast current of Egyptian history, where pyramids tower, sphinxes guard the desert, and pharaohs leave behind hundreds of texts and temples, the name Nefertiti still stands apart, not because of abundant evidence, but because of absence. She blazed like the sun during the Amarna period, then vanished in silence, leaving a void wide enough for humanity's imagination to fill. And because of that, she became one of history's most immortal figures. Nefertiti was the embodiment of beauty, but she was more than that. She was equal power, the partner of a heretic king, the face of a religious revolution unlike any other. She was the mother of 6 princesses, the image of a sacred family beneath Aten's rays, the symbol of unity and legitimacy. And when she disappeared, that silence resounded louder than any praise, a silence that, 3,000 years later, we are still trying to solve. Her legacy doesn't live in official records, those were deliberately erased, but in the bust, in the Amarna reliefs, in shards of pottery, in hypotheses, in excavations. From there, Nefertiti became not just a figure of the past, but of the present, a symbol of feminine strength and beauty, of endless mystery, of humanity's power to alter an entire order, even if only for a fleeting moment in history. Today, when we look into the pupilless eyes of that statue, we don't just see a face, we see a question without an answer. Who was she? What did she do? How did she vanish? And what message does she still want to send us? It is that mystery that makes her immortal. If Cleopatra lives in tales of tragic romance, Nefertiti lives in silence, in obscurity, in questions stretching from one generation to the next. And perhaps that is why Nefertiti has never truly died. She remains in the imagination of humanity, in museums, in films, in books, in every new excavation. A queen without a tomb, without a stele, without an ending, only a legacy that stretches on, like the sunlight of Aten she once embraced, forever shining on the face of the beautiful one who has come. If you were to stand on a mountain ridge in Guangxi on an autumn morning, when the white mist still curls around the valley, before your eyes would open a scene so breathtaking that any painter would drop his brush, any poet would fall silent. The Longji rice terraces, rolling like waves of stone, curling like the scales of a colossal dragon stretched endlessly across the mountains. This is not just farmland, it is a living painting, co-created by humans and nature, layered across centuries, climbing mountains that rise 1,000 meters high. The terraces of Longji have a hypnotic quality. From a distance, each tier stacks like rippling waves. When the morning sun pours down, the water-filled paddies shine like mirrors, flashing silver, gold, and green. From above, they resemble a river of light flowing along the mountainside, each curve like a stroke of black ink. The name Longji means dragon's backbone, and when you see it, you understand why. The entire landscape looks like a dragon at rest, its scales glittering, its breath still visible in the drifting clouds of mist. The beauty of Longji lies not only in its form, but in its endless transformations with the seasons. In spring, when water is poured into the fields, the valley becomes 1,000 tilted mirrors reflecting the sky. Clouds drift past, dressing the mountain in transparent silk, each terrace shimmering with a different shade of heaven. In summer, the young rice sprouts lush green ribbons, cascading layer after layer, deep green at the base, pale green at the peak, like a blossoming ink painting. In autumn, the rice ripens into gold, turning Longji into a radiant sea of light, as if the dragon's scales themselves were glowing. In winter, snow cloaks the curves in white, and the land becomes a dragon slumbering beneath a quilt of frost. 4 seasons, 4 costumes, each one a masterpiece. Look closer, and you'll see the details are as refined as the grand design. Every terrace wall was shaped by hand, over generations, curving as delicately as a blade carving the mountainside. Earth and stone are carefully packed to hold water, forming smooth arcs that link hundreds of fields together, like the joined scales of a dragon. From afar, they resemble giant palm lines etched by the earth itself, telling the story of life and harvest. Up close, you see glittering drops of water, tiny fish darting in the paddies, and fragile rice stalks thrusting upward, reflecting the light of the universe in each blade. What makes Longji truly unique is that it is both human and natural at once. No single lifetime created it. It is the labor of centuries. Generation after generation of Zhuang and Yao people added steps, carved slopes, and extended ridges. One generation planted, the next harvested, the next expanded. Each terrace is not just grain, but the fingerprint of human hands pressed into the mountain. To see Longji is to read an epic of labor, written not in ink, but in soil, sweat, and faith. And Longji is not just to be seen, it is to be heard. At dawn, water trickling into the paddies becomes an underground orchestra. Wind sweeps through the valley, brushing the rice into waves of sound. Footsteps along the banks echo, mixing with rooster calls and children's laughter. Together, they form a natural symphony. No instruments, no conductor, just mountains, water, and human rhythm. Close your eyes, and you can even smell it. The damp scent of soil after rain, the fresh green of young rice, the golden sweetness of cut straw, the smoky tang of wood fires drifting from wooden homes in the valley. It is the perfume of life itself, of harvest and heritage. It's no wonder the locals see Longji as a dragon. In Eastern tradition, the dragon rules water, rain, and crops. The terraces are how humans tamed the dragon, turning raw nature into sustenance. Each terrace is a scale, each stream a vein, the whole mountain a living body. When the fields glow gold, the dragon shines awake. When snow falls, the dragon sleeps beneath the white. And the farmers, dressed in indigo, are the heartbeat keepers of the beast. Stories say a dragon once flew over these mountains, bewitched by their beauty, and chose to lie down, here, leaving its shimmering scales as fields for mankind. Myth or not, it reveals a truth. Longji is harmony incarnate, where humans and nature share one body. For visitors today, Longji may be a photo, a museum-worthy scene, but for locals, it is survival, each terrace a livelihood, each curve a legacy. That mix of beauty and necessity makes it unmatched. You can find terraces elsewhere, but only here does the dragon reveal itself, sacred yet humble, dreamlike yet practical. Longji proves that beauty doesn't need marble or studios. It can rise from mud, from sweat, from countless rough hands. When those hands move in rhythm across generations, the result transcends survival and becomes culture, a heritage the world must admire. Stay until dusk, and the terraces change again. The sun sinks, fields flare gold, then bronze, then blush pink like a maiden's cheek. From afar, the mountainside becomes a shifting canvas, painted only by time and light. At night, the terraces darken into black silk ribbons, moonlight sparkling like dragon eyes in the water. The villagers say, by day, Longji is the golden dragon. By night, it is the black dragon, hidden yet alive. Rise early enough, and you'll witness a miracle. Mist rising from the valley, weaving through each step. The first rays of sun pierce it, scattering stars across the paddies. The mountain turns into a fallen galaxy, as if the dragon exhaled the heavens onto the earth. Every season brings a new face, but one truth remains. Longji humbles you before nature and fills you with pride in human hands. No single artist could ever paint a canvas of 1,000 terraces, yet generations of farmers did one hoe, one shovel, one lifetime at a time. Each terrace is a stroke, each wall a note, together a song of earth and water. Longji is collective art. No single name can claim it. Families, clans, generations all added a piece. It is a colossal ink painting drawn by thousands of anonymous artists, astonishingly harmonious, never chaotic. That is Longji's secret, the balance of individual and community, the fusion that creates beauty eternal. When night falls and you sit by a wooden house, lights from the valley twinkle like a string of beads, farmers' silhouettes still move across the ridges, dogs bark in the distance, wood smoke drifts with the scent of ripe rice. It is simple, yet profound, a reminder that these terraces are not scenery, but a living world, where humans and nature blend without borders. And so, Longji is not just beauty for the eyes, it is a mirror for humanity. It shows us that when patience meets harmony with nature, we can create works that feed, inspire, and symbolize beyond borders. This beauty is not luxury, but labor. And that is why it lasts, because it is carved not only into mountains, but into memory, generation after generation. If the Longji rice terraces today make you stand in awe as if before a living ink painting, then their history of formation is a harsh epic of blood, sweat, and generations of patience. Behind every graceful curve winding along the mountainsides lies centuries of struggle against steep slopes, hard rock, storms, famine, and the isolation of highland life. No terrace was created in a single day, and no great achievement came without cost. Longji is living proof of humanity's power to transform nature, not through destruction, but through endurance, resilience, and wisdom passed down through time. The origins of Longji trace back to the 13th-14th centuries, during the Yuan dynasty. At that time, ethnic groups like the Dao, Zhuang, and Yao migrated to Guangxi's mountains. The terrain was unforgiving, steep slopes, rugged cliffs, no broad plains to till. Relying only on narrow valleys could never feed entire communities. Meanwhile, population pressure grew, and the need for food became urgent. In the face of survival, settlers began to reclaim every inch of mountain land. Instead of abandoning the slopes, they built earthen banks, leveled soil, and transformed mountainsides into water-holding steppes. At first, they were just small, scattered plots near villages, but over generations, terrace after terrace was added, expanding outward until the entire mountains became collective masterpieces. Carving mountains into terraces was no simple task. Imagine a farming family in the 14th century, armed only with wooden hoes, crude iron axes, and bamboo baskets. How could they split stone, build walls, and hold water on steep slopes? Every step had to be carefully calculated, high enough so water flowed from one terrace to the next, but not too steep or erosion would wash everything away. These farmers were both hydraulic engineers and landscape architects, but they relied only on memory and oral tradition. No maps, no compasses. Each Longji terrace is, in truth, a marvel of folk engineering. Generations worked with astonishing patience. A single terrace could take a year to complete. Young men split stone and leveled earth. Women hauled soil to build dikes. Children tended cattle. Year after year, new terraces grew like fresh dragon scales etched into the mountains. There was no rush, no obsession with speed, only steady accumulation. Each generation sowed its part, then left it for the next, like an epic poem where every chapter was written by a different hand. In this process, locals also developed an intricate irrigation system. Streams from the mountains were channeled into small ditches, distributed down step by step. When heavy rains came, water didn't flood destructively. It cascaded gently across terraces, watering rice while preventing erosion. In drought, families shared water according to unwritten water laws. These rules weren't written on paper, but carved into collective memory. Who could open a channel when? Who had to close it? At what time? Anyone who broke them faced communal punishment. These invisible laws held Longji together for centuries, preventing chaos and collapse. Alongside, legends took root. People told of a time when newcomers found the mountains barren. One night, the elder dreamed of a golden dragon stretched across the slopes, its shimmering scales, its breath turning into streams. The dragon said, "Follow the shape of my scales, and the land will yield rice. The people will prosper." The villagers awoke and built their fields in the dragon's pattern, and from then on, harvests flourished. This tale explained not only the name dragon's backbone, but gave faith for generations to persist despite hardship. By the late Ming and early Qing dynasties, 16th-17th centuries, the terraces had expanded dramatically. Even the steepest, tallest mountains were gradually conquered. Where once lay only forest and stone, now golden waves of rice rolled each autumn. Longji became more than survival, it was pride. With their own hands, villagers turned mountains into rice, nature into an ally. Visitors from afar marveled, calling it fields painted by heaven. But to the locals, it was simply the fruit of endurance, beauty born from sweat. Looking back, the formation of Longji reveals a rare fusion of practicality and art. Its purpose was survival food for life. Yet the centuries-long collective labor, the harmony of humans and nature, elevated it beyond subsistence into cultural symbol and art. Longji proves beauty can spring not only from aesthetic longing, but from the struggle to endure. And because of that, this beauty has lasted, immune to centuries of wind and rain. In later centuries, as dynasties stabilized, Longji's terraces grew into an economic and social system, sustaining entire mountain communities. From the 17th to 19th centuries, their area expanded to cover over 70 square kilometers, rising from 300 to more than 1,100 meters. Villagers called it the stairway to heaven, for when you looked up, the terraces climbed skyward like steps to the clouds. Through it all, each generation carried on. When soil eroded, they rebuilt. When channels broke, they repaired. When populations grew, they added more terraces. The community functioned like one living body, beating in rhythm with the land. Thus, Longji became not only a landscape, but a collective memory, a mirror of how people survived and thrived in unforgiving nature. The terraces also forged a culture of cooperation. The shared irrigation system bound every family together. If one household ignored the water laws, the whole village could lose a harvest. So, solidarity and communal rules were shaped by the very need to preserve the terraces. Children grew up not just learning to plant, but to share water, to listen to the rhythm of the community. This became the cultural foundation that allowed Longji to endure for centuries without breaking apart. During the Qing dynasty, scholars visited Longji and left poems of praise. They called it the world's finest wonder, waves of rice reaching the heavens, a marvel of mankind. Such words spread its fame across China. Yet for locals, it was still daily rice, not a wonder. This duality, outsiders seeing grandeur, insiders seeing sustenance, became Longji's essence, both global marvel and humble meal. By the 20th century, amid war, upheaval, and social change, Longji's terraces remained a fortress of patience. Modern farming technology spread elsewhere, but here, no tractor could climb these mountains, no plains invited mechanization. Farmers still walked the narrow ridges, carried rice on their backs, and listened to water trickle through centuries-old channels. Thus Longji preserved its soul, untouched by industrialization. Today, with tourism booming, Longji has become a renowned destination, drawing visitors from around the world. People come not only to photograph the majestic scenery, but to touch a living history of labor, endurance, and harmony with nature. Scholars now regard Longji as priceless human heritage, a reminder that humanity survives not by conquering nature, but by adapting and shaping it with patience. Stand atop the mountain and look down, and you see more than terraces. You see an unwritten epic. Each step a story, each curve a memory, each harvest a new chapter. And when the sun reflects on thousands of paddies, it is as if the ancestors smile, proud of what they left behind. The history of Longji is not just local history, it is proof of humanity's enduring strength, the ability to turn hardship into beauty, survival into art, toil into a legacy that endures with time. If the Longji rice terraces are a mighty dragon stretched across the mountains, then the irrigation system is the bloodstream that keeps that dragon alive. Without water, the terraces would be nothing but cracked, dry soil, incapable of sustaining life. But how do you guide water across steep mountainsides? How do you make sure every terrace, from the highest to the lowest, receives enough without waste? That's the secret of engineering, and the collective wisdom that generations of Dao, Zhuang, and Yao people at Longji have built with patience. In Guangxi's mountains, rain is abundant yet uneven. During the wet season, water pours down in torrents. In the dry season, the earth splits. Small streams run through valleys and gorges, but turning them into lifelines for thousands of terraces was a daunting puzzle. The ancients learned by observing every drop, listening to the trickle of streams, and sensing the slope of the land with their own feet. From there, they dug channels, built banks, and created a web of irrigation that still works today. What's remarkable is that this system was never drawn on paper, never mapped out. It was passed down through memory, instruction, and hands-on labor. Every generation, children followed their parents up the mountain, learning to open the water, patch a bank, and judge if a field had enough just by looking. Over time, irrigation knowledge became part of the culture itself, a form of folk science, precise without formulas. The principle is simple. Water flows from high to low, from one terrace to the next. Villagers channeled streams with narrow ditches hugging the slopes, sometimes just dirt trenches, sometimes reinforced with stone, sometimes lined with bamboo or wood to stop erosion. Water flowed into the highest field, then down through small outlets carved in the banks, spilling gently into the next one below. Step by step, the stream cascaded through hundreds, even thousands of terraces, nourishing them all. None were left dry, none drowned. Balance, like a perfectly tuned orchestra. To keep that balance, farmers invented countless small techniques. To hold water, they packed mud and straw into the outlets, forming temporary plugs. To release, they swept them aside, and the flow poured down. Terrace banks were constantly reinforced with earth and stone. In some places, grass was planted to bind the soil, preventing erosion while adding a soft green edge. Every tiny detail was the result of centuries of trial, error, and mastery farmers' engineering at its finest. But this wasn't just technique, it was social law. In the mountains, water was never abundant, so dividing it fairly was survival. Each village had a water elder, respected for knowing the flow. They set the schedule, who opened channels when, whose turn it was to give way. These laws were never written down, but everyone obeyed. Break them, and you weren't just punished, you were shunned for breaking harmony. Such invisible rules kept irrigation flowing smoothly for centuries, without soldiers or officials. Walk along an irrigation ditch in the morning, and you'll witness something simple yet sacred. Drops of clear water slipping between stones, rippling across the fields in tiny waves. Sunlight catches them, turning them into glistening jewels. In that shimmer lies life, rice for the village, faith in the harvest. Locals often say, water is the blood of the fields, and the fields are the blood of the people. Indeed, irrigation sustains not only crops, but the very culture of this land. The true strength of Longji's irrigation lies not only in clever engineering, but in how it became the lifeblood of the community itself. Up in the highlands, every drop was shared not by the power of the strongest, but by collective agreement. Irrigation here is proof. Water is not just technical, it's social. When storm clouds rolled in, whole villages gathered. Men shored up banks, women carried soil, children brought bamboo. In downpours, they stood together in the rain, hacking channels, patching weak spots with bare hands. On those days, the village became one collective work site. Rich or poor didn't matter, because if the ditch broke, everyone lost. Shared labor forged solidarity, making irrigation the very emblem of unity. In the dry season, water became as precious as gold. Villagers met in the communal hall to plan division. Water was released in order. Upper fields first, lower fields after. But each family had a share no one left without. Elders marked time with bamboo sticks, watched shadows to switch turns. Simple acts, yet within them, justice endured for centuries. Not enforced by law books, but by trust. Irrigation even tied into ritual. Before planting, villagers held a water offering ceremony. They brought gifts to the source, lit incense, sang folk songs, praying that the mountain and dragon spirits would bless the streams. Afterward, the whole village opened the channels, guiding the first flow into the terraces. It was both ritual and community act, a reminder that water was not just managed by humans, but shared with nature and gods. Today, tourists love photographing the glowing terraces. Few notice the quiet channels snaking along the slopes. Yet without them, no terraces, no rice, no sweeping. Vistas. A ditch only a foot wide, a few 100 meters long, can feed an entire village. One drop, in the right place, becomes a meal. That is the miracle of irrigation, greatness born from small things. Amazingly, this system still endures, unchanged for centuries. Elsewhere, irrigation demands machines, concrete, and steel. At Longji, It's still earth, stone, bamboo, and wood. But that simplicity is its strength. Bamboo rots, wood decays, but villagers replace them, patch the old, carry on the cycle. Its survival doesn't depend on modern materials, but on people. As long as the community remains, as long as someone tends the water, the system lives. Picture this. Sunset on the terraces. You walk the narrow ridge, hear the trickle of water in the ditch, see the last rays glint across its surface. It's simple, yet profound. A reminder that Longji's beauty lies not just in golden fields, but in unseen flows, in community wisdom that turned water into lifeblood. That is why Longji's irrigation is more than engineering. It is cultural heritage, proof of harmony between people and nature, proof that survival and beauty can flow together, sustaining each other through centuries. If the irrigation system is the bloodstream that keeps the Longji rice terraces alive, then ritual is the soul that holds the rhythm of the entire community together. On those steep mountainsides, every farming season is not just labor, but a chain of ceremonies that transform agriculture into a spiritual symphony. For the Dao, Zhuang, and Yao people, the terraces are not merely land, they are gifts from the gods. Every drop of water, every grain of rice, carries sacred life. That's why before planting, before harvesting, before opening the water channels, there must be offerings, songs, and dances, a way to pray, to give thanks, and to maintain harmony with heaven and earth. In spring, when mist still clings to the peaks, the water ritual begins. Villagers gather by the headstream, bringing humble offerings, a chicken, a handful of rice, a jar of wine. The elder chants prayers, calling on the mountain and dragon spirits to grant abundant water. His words mingle with the sound of flowing streams and rustling bamboo, creating an atmosphere both mystical and intimate. After the rite, the first flow is released, rushing into the channels that lead down to the terraces. The village cheers, drums and gongs echo. Children chase after the water as if chasing joy itself. For them, that moment is not just the start of a farming season, it is the beginning of a new year of life. When the young rice turns green, a rain-calling ritual follows. They believe that without rain, the terraces will wither and the dragon will thirst. So the whole village performs dragon dances and lion dances not only for entertainment, but to call the skies. Elders say that many times after such dances, rain did indeed fall. That belief, carried through generations, ties human life to the divine. In autumn, when golden rice waves ripple down the slopes, the harvest thanksgiving is held the grandest celebration of the year. Chickens and pigs are sacrificed, sticky rice steamed, cakes made, corn wine poured, and offerings laid on the highest terrace for the dragon spirit and ancestors. Afterward, the entire village feasts, sings, and dances around the fire. Folk songs echo across the valleys, blending with the barking of dogs, the beating of drums, and children's laughter. It is not just an agricultural rite, it is a festival of kinship, where everyone shares the joy of abundance. These rituals are not only for faith, they carry deep social meaning. They bind the community, reminding everyone that the terraces belong to all, not to one. Water is shared, rice is shared, festivals are shared. Through that, the village has endured for centuries without splintering under greed or conflict. Here, ritual is not only religion, but a social system for farming, turning hardship into joy, turning each season into a cycle of life and spirit. If ritual is the sacred side, then daily life in the Longji terraces is the earthly side, yet filled with poetry. Among these endless mountains, life beats to the rhythm of rice. Morning mist still clings when roosters crow to wake the village. Men shoulder hoes, leading buffalo to the fields. Women carry water, babies strapped on their backs, working while singing. Children run along the banks, muddy feet chasing tiny fish in puddles. Here, there is no clear line between labor and leisure, because even in work, they sing folk songs, joke, and turn toil into a communal chorus. Wooden houses with thatched roofs dot the slopes. In the evenings, smoke rises, mixing with mist into drifting clouds. In the kitchen, women steam sticky rice, boil forest greens, roast meat. Men, after a long day, sit with corn wine, telling stories about the strength of a buffalo, about a newly built terrace, about floods that once swept away soil. But there are also myths of a dragon sleeping in the mountains, of a fairy who became a drop of water to bless the fields. These tales nurture imagination, so children grow up not only with mud on their hands, but with dreams woven from legend. Life here revolves around sharing. When one family finishes harvesting, neighbors help them dry the grain, knowing they'll receive help in return. When there's a wedding or funeral, the entire village contributes rice, meat, wine. This collective spirit helps them survive from hunger to floods. The terraces don't just feed stomachs, they feed community, an invisible bond stronger than any earthen bank. And within that rhythm, music and festivals are the spice of life. During idle times, youths gather in open clearings, singing in call and response, dancing in circles, playing bamboo and wooden instruments. Songs echo through the valley, bounce off the mountains, and return like voices of the gods. Often, they're simple love lines. I have terraces, you have water jars. Together we plant rice. Together we reap harvests. Simple, but radiant. Life at Longji is humble, even harsh, but never joyless. Because every harvest, when granaries are full, joy multiplies in shared meals, in raised cups, in song. It's a joy no bustling city can buy. Joy born of harmony between humans, nature, and community. And in that rhythm, woven of ritual and daily life, lies the eternal soul of the Longji rice terraces. Not only a wonder of landscape, but a wonder of human life itself. Whenever people stand before a monumental work of their own making, they search for ways to explain its greatness through myth. The Longji rice terraces are no exception. For the Dao, Zhuang, and Yao people of Guangxi, these sky-reaching steps are not only the product of labor, but also the heart of sacred legends, stories woven to turn the visible into the eternal. Passed down by firelight, in festivals, and in lullabies, they've carved themselves into collective memory, so that the terraces are not just soil and water, but a living being with the soul of dragons, spirits, and ancestors. Elders often tell of a time when Longji was nothing but rugged peaks, jagged rocks, floods in the rains, and cracked earth in the droughts. Migrants tried to farm but failed, hunger stalking them endlessly. One night, the village elder dreamed of a golden dragon coiling along the mountainside. The dragon said, "Follow the shape of my scales, shape the soil to hold water, and rice will grow, and people will thrive." On waking, the elder told the village, and together they followed the dragon's pattern, building step upon step. From then on, rice sprouted, harvests overflowed, and the land was called Longji, the dragon's back. This legend not only explains the name, but also carries a belief that the dragon, the supreme symbol of the East, lay down here, transformed into terraces to protect humanity. Another legend speaks of a water fairy. She lived in the heavens, but seeing the people starving, she transformed into drops of dew that fell into the terraces. Wherever she landed, rice grew green and lush. But she could only remain if people loved one another and shared both water and seed. If disputes arose, she would vanish, leaving the land dry and barren. So elders always warned their children, unity not only preserves water, but keeps the fairy with the mountains. More than a tale, it's a parable about community spirit, the very foundation that has allowed the terraces to endure for centuries. There are also stories steeped in sorrow. Once, a young couple fell in love but were forbidden by their clans. They swore that if they could not marry, they would become mountains and terraces to feed the people. After a great storm, villagers found new terraces carved into the slopes, wide and fertile. They believed the lovers' bodies had become the land, so their descendants could plant forever. Since then, each harvest season, young men and women sing love songs across the terraces, honoring the memory of a love that became fertile ground. Though wrapped in myth, these tales are really the way a community invests its faith into a monumental work. Terraces require more than labor. They demand patience beyond a single lifetime. Only the belief that they were fulfilling the will of spirits, or carrying on the vow of ancestors, could sustain such perseverance over centuries. Myth, then, is the glue of spirit, turning hardship into a sacred journey. The meaning of the Longji rice terraces doesn't end with folklore. It extends into layers of cultural, social, and philosophical value. First, they are symbols of harmony between people and nature. In many civilizations, The story is one of conquest. But at Longji, it's different. People did not break the mountains, they followed their shape. They did not fight water, they held and guided it. The terraces remind us that true strength lies not in force, but in adaptation and creativity and balance. Second, they embody community and unity. A terrace cannot stand alone without the neighbouring wall, water spills, and the field fails. Likewise, no family can live apart, water must be shared, work must be collective. That's why Longji is the embodiment of one for all for one. This truth is echoed in the water fairy legend, in the rules of irrigation, in the harvest festivals. It is the social foundation that has kept mountain villages strong for centuries. Third, the terraces carry artistic and aesthetic meaning beyond agriculture. From above, they are brushstrokes of a giant ink painting, shifting with the seasons. Silver in spring waters, green in summer rice, gold in autumn harvest, white in winter snow. Villagers did not intend to create art, but through collective labour, they painted a living masterpiece. It reminds us that beauty can rise from necessity, that even in survival, humanity can create wonders that awe the world. Finally, the Longji terraces are spiritual symbols. They are not just fields, but open temples. Every water ritual, every channel opened, every harvest connects people to gods, ancestors, and nature. That belief turns mud and earth into sanctuaries without walls or roofs, but as sacred as any shrine. People enter the terraces not only to labour, but to pray, to sing, to live in communion with sky and earth. Today, visitors see their beauty and take photos, but for locals, every step is a living symbol, a proof that ancestors endured, persevered, and left not just food, but pride. To them, the terraces are history written in soil, poetry written in mud, mythology written in sweat. That meaning goes far beyond farming. It is testimony of civilization, a lesson in the strength of community, and an endless source of inspiration for art, philosophy, and modern life itself. When you look down from the highest peaks of Longji, what unfolds before your eyes is not just a natural wonder or an agricultural project. It is an epic of endurance. Every step, every water channel, every grain of rice that grows is a line in that epic. But to truly understand Longji's value, we must widen our perspective, not stopping at scenery, history, irrigation, rituals, or legends, but seeing it as a mirror reflecting the relationship between humanity, nature, and civilization itself. What makes Longji special is not only its scale, thousands of terraces stretching across more than 70 square kilometers, rising from 300 to over 1,100 meters, but also human patience. In other civilizations, great monuments were built to honor a king, an empire, a religion, pyramids for the pharaohs, the Parthenon for Athena, the Great Wall to keep out invaders. But the Longji rice terraces bear no royal name, no statue of glory, no inscription of achievement. They are the work of nameless people, farmers in indigo clothes, with calloused hands, who lived and died without recognition. And that is what makes it sacred. A collective masterpiece, where beauty belongs not to one person, but to an entire community, to generations linked across centuries. When comparing Longji to other famous terraces around the world, from Banaue in the Philippines to Sapa in Vietnam to the Andes of South America, you see that each has its own soul. Banaue is tied to the Ifugao culture, Sapa to the Hmong and Red Dao, but Longji is bound to the dragon, the supreme symbol of Chinese culture. Here, nature and culture are inseparable. The mountain becomes a dragon's back, the terraces its scales, the flowing water its breath. This reveals how humans see the world not only with eyes, but with imagination and belief. They don't see mountains as rock, but as the body of a sacred being. They don't see farming as mere labour, but as collaboration with the divine. And that belief is what sustained them through centuries, even when human strength seemed small against such vast mountains. Longji also reveals a philosophy: turn hardship into beauty. Steep slopes, hard rock, harsh weather, all obstacles to farming. But instead of leaving to find flatter lands, people stayed, adapted, and transformed hardship into advantage. Terraces kept rainwater instead of losing it, turned slopes into flat fields, mountains into granaries. This reflects the Eastern idea of those who follow nature endure. The people of Longji didn't cut down mountains or block rivers. They followed the mountain to plant, followed the river to irrigate. The result is a landscape that feeds, amazes, and inspires. On a larger scale, Longji is a global symbol of sustainability. In the modern age, obsessed with technology, machines, and productivity, Longji shows that a traditional system can last for centuries without harming the environment. Water is conserved, soil erosion is prevented, ecosystems thrive. Fish swim in the ditches, ducks run across fields, grasses grow on the borders. This system feeds both humans and nature. It's a lesson the modern world facing environmental crisis would do well to learn from. Tourism adds a new chapter to Longji's life. Once known only locally, now visitors come from all over the world to see it, photograph it, film it. Drones soar above, capturing terraces glowing in morning sun. Images appear in travel magazines, on Instagram, in documentaries, making Longji a global icon. But for locals, the terraces remain what they've always been: fields to plant, harvest, and live from. This duality creates a striking paradox. The same landscape, but to outsiders it's a photographer's paradise, while to villagers it's rice bowls and survival. And this layering deepens Longji's meaning, both a world heritage and a community's lifeline. Go further, and Longji can be seen as a metaphor for Chinese history itself. Like the terraces, Chinese civilization is built in layers, generation after generation, dynasty after dynasty, enduring for millennia. Just as the terraces are sustained by patience and collective effort, so too has the civilization survived through unity and perseverance. The terraces are not just scenery, but a model of civilization itself. Complex yet balanced, laborious yet beautiful, practical yet sacred. Perhaps Longji's deepest beauty lies in how it makes us look back at ourselves. Standing before thousands of terraces, you don't just see mountains and water, you see collective strength, faith, and humanity's power to turn hardship into harmony. You realize that behind every grain of rice you eat may lie an entire system of labor, rituals, legends, and history. And you begin to understand, terraces are not just landscapes, but a philosophy of life. Be patient, stay united, follow nature, and any hardship can be transformed into beauty. As the last light of day pours over the Longji rice terraces, each golden step glows like the scales of a giant dragon, and only then do we truly see the grandeur of this creation. Behind this breathtaking beauty lies not just soil and water, but centuries of sweat, calloused hands, and sacred beliefs. Every terrace is a human touch upon nature, but instead of destruction, it is a gentle touch, turning high mountains into granaries and rocky slopes into stairways to the sky. The Longji terraces carry no king's name, no temples built to glorify them. They are the masterpiece of the nameless, those who chose to stay, to cling to the mountains, to cling to the land, and with patience turned hardship into immortal beauty. And that is what makes Longji sacred. It is not the legacy of one person, but of a community, not of one dynasty, but of countless generations. Looking at Longji, we see perfect harmony between humanity and nature. The mountains hold their shape, the people hold the water flows, the rice grows, and within that endless cycle, the community finds life and finds faith. Festivals of water prayers, harvest thanksgivings, tales of golden dragons and water fairies, all of them reflect one simple truth. People have never lived on rice alone, but also on faith and collective memory. Today, Longji has become a tourist destination, an image that spreads across the globe. But in the eyes of the locals, it is still just fields where they plant, harvest, and raise their children. This duality gives it even deeper meaning. On one side, a landscape admired worldwide, on the other, a humble bowl of rice. And perhaps it is this very simplicity that makes Longji great, because it reminds us that true beauty does not lie in extravagance, but in endurance, in the small acts repeated across generations. When we leave Longji, carrying photos and stories, what lingers is not only the sight of terraces climbing toward the heavens, but a lesson. That patience can create beauty, that unity can build wonders, and that when humanity follows nature, even the tallest mountains can become treasure. Longji, then, is not just fields, but a whisper from the dragon's back reminding us that the most enduring beauty is the kind nurtured by sweat, by faith, and by time.